Everybody. Okay, I've now heard the sound from the recording, which means that it's time for me to call this meeting to order. And we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call so people can hear and be heard.
Mr. Balachandran is logging on right now. Can you hear us?
Go, Paul, can you hear us?
Okay.
He's nodding.
Mr. Barlow.
Here.
Ms. Behring.
Here.
Ms. Engman. Ms. Krishnan Kuti.
Here.
Mr. Lipscomb. Mr. Marshall.
He was here earlier.
Mr. Bernier.
Here.
Mr. Best. Here. Mr. Fragola.
Here.
Mr. Frank. Here. Ms. Trainer. Mr. Gracie Griffin. Here. Mr. Heller.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Ms. Strickland.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Here. Mr. Beck. Ms. Hartle.
Here.
Ms. Hoover.
Here.
Mr. Piper.
Here.
Mr. Cervello.
Here.
Mr. Graham.
Here.
Mr. Hammeister. Mr. Hardin.
Here.
Mr. Lord.
Here.
Mr. Wilson.
Here.
Mr. Abrams. Mr. Magruder.
Here.
Ms. Robb.
Here.
Mr. Trevino.
Here.
And Ms. Whitman.
Here.
Mr. Chair, give the meeting back to you.
Okay, next is public comment. Members of the public are invited to comment on items not on the agenda. 5 minutes per person time limit, please. Comments for specific items on the agenda should be reserved for that time. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment during this public hour? Seeing and hearing now, hearing none, I will close the public hour, and we have 2 introductions of 2 new staff members, or two directors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to take a moment to briefly introduce 2 of our newest appointed agency directors. One is a familiar face and name. Sean Kaufman is now our permanent fire director. Sean was interim fire director since January and was appointed fire director within the past few weeks since the last meeting. So congratulations, Sean. And we're also pleased to announce we have a new finance director, Kimberly McMullen, joined us about 3 weeks ago and is doing a great job so far. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you, Mr. Norenberg. Okay, new agenda items. Members may request that additional items of business be added to the meeting's agenda. If approved by a majority vote of the members, the proposed new agenda item will be placed on the agenda at the discretion of the chair. Is there anyone who wishes to propose a new agenda item? Looking around the room, looking for hands. I do not see any. So there will be no new agenda items at this meeting. The first item is consent agenda A, which is all municipalities agenda. That includes 2 items, which is the approval of the minutes and the Microsoft Office 365 renewal contract. Is there anyone who wishes to pull one of these items from the agenda? I do not see any. Do I hear a motion? So moved. Second? Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Now, there's also consent item B, which is Parks and Recreation item, a budget amendment on the Whitehall Road Regional Parks containers. Does anyone wish to pull this item from the agenda? Seeing or hearing no one, I will ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second? Second? Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. 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 Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Now we have our update on the 2020 census results, and presenting it is Mr. Buckle, who I understand, at least according to the Center Daily Times, will have a new job soon in Harris Township. And congratulations to him,
Thank you very much.
and to Harris Township as well.
So this evening, I'm going to be giving a brief update on the most recent results of the 2020 census. Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't have the microphone on. Apologize about that. So I will be giving a brief update on the most recent results of the 2020 census, which are being projected there on the screen. Let's see here if I can get this to work. Okay, so last year we received the first round of results, which primarily included just redistricting data. This was population, race, and ethnicity. And so at that point, we were able to find out what the total population counts were for all the municipalities, but we didn't have any data about the population beyond just basic numbers. So Back in May of this year, the Census Bureau released the latest round of results, which included more demographic and housing data. And this allows us to dig deeper into the results to have a better understanding of the age structure of the population, as well as some other factors that might help to understand the counts that we saw back at that initial redistricting release. So if you will all recall, the redistricting data that was shared with you last year showed that the region had a population of around 94,625 people. That was an increase from 2010 to 2020 of 2.75%. We had anticipated about a 4 to 5% growth, so it was definitely less than we had anticipated, for a total increase of around 2,500 people. What that showed was that all of the municipalities did have growth with the exception of State College Borough. That decline in the borough was definitely unexpected, but Ferguson Township had the highest numeric increase, and Harris Township had the highest increase by percentage. So when we think about the age, population by age here in the region, I think we all have a couple assumptions. We know that the Center region has a large student age population, which we generally consider to be 18 to 24. Between 2010 and 2020, the enrollment at Penn State increased by about 2,000 persons, so it would be reasonable to expect our population to have increased in that 18 to 24 year age range. We also know that previous census results showed that we have an aging population, which is consistent with the United States in general. When we compare the 2010 to 2020 population change by age cohort, what we see is that most cohorts did experience an increase in population, with the exception of the under 5 cohort, 15 to 19, 45 to 49, and 50 to 54. The population 65 and over increased by 42.7%. Again, that is consistent with more national trends. What was interesting when looking at this age data is that the 18 to 24-year-old age group declined by 7.2%, or 2,900 people, which was not expected, considering we know that Penn State enrollment increased by about 2,000 in the last decade. Of course, we know that there was a pandemic going on, and a lot of students had left the community at this time. We were hoping that that would not impact the numbers given the efforts that were being made by the Census Bureau, but it appears that the student age population was not accounted for. So some of the other declines, the under 5 population, that could be a cause of falling birth rates. That's something, again, that's happening nationwide. You can look up macro demographic trends and see that we are having fewer births than we did a decade or two ago. The 45 to 54 age group makes sense in this. We already anticipated this. That's Generation X. It's a smaller generation when compared to baby boomers and millennials on either side. So if we went back to 2010, 35 to 44 was a smaller population group than its cohorts above and below. But 18 to 24, again, is something that we did not expect to see a decline in that group. So if we dig a little deeper, Patton Township and State College Borough experienced declines in this 18 to 24-year-old age cohort. The Patton Township decline was primarily in individuals aged 20 to 24, and State College Borough had a more significant decline in the 18 and 19 age group, as well as the 22 to 24 age group. College Township did have a decline in 18 and 19-year-olds, but overall you had enough 20 to 24-year-olds to make up for the difference to show a positive increase. Again, if we go back and compare the numbers with what the region saw in the census results versus Penn State data, we're seeing significantly less students than we would have anticipated. These declines are really limited to where student housing is located. The 25 and over population growth was minimal, but so it doesn't look like we exchanged younger students for grad students. Again, Penn State grew in the last decade, and really the only thing that can explain this is it's likely that there was just a significant undercount of the population due to the pandemic. So another thing that we did was took a look at some other university communities to see if we're unique. The general trend of population declines, or lower than anticipated student age populations, was found. So if we look at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, they had an increase in enrollment of around 7,700 students between 2010 and 2020. The census showed they only added about 1,000 students, so significantly less than what they had changes in enrollment. Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where Bucknell is located, had an enrollment change of 53 in the positive, and the 18 to 24 cohort showed about 442 less than in 2010. And then the last one that I have here is Ithaca, New York, which showed an increase of about 3,400 students, and they had a decline of about 65 people within the student age cohort. So some of the impacts from this can first off include a decrease in federal funding. Political representation can be changed based on boundaries. Generally, it's just more difficult to plan for the future when we don't know what our baseline population is. The American Community Survey and other population programs like the Population Estimates Program from the Census Bureau will unfortunately use 2020 census as their baseline. So these numbers, being incorrect, will carry forward in these other programs that we utilize for a variety of purposes. And there really is, unfortunately, no way to address this at the municipal or regional level. There's not an option to just file an appeal with the census and ask them to go out and just recount. You can do what's called a special census, but a special census actually replaces the 2020 census. So if you do a 2025 special census, that would be a whole new census that reports the population in that year. It's a very costly thing to do, and there is no guarantee of success as well. You basically hire the Census Bureau to come out and redo everything and pay for the cost of that census. So as far as next steps, staff plans to include this data in population forecasting projects. The municipalities will certainly want to consider any impacts this might have, especially in terms of ACS data inaccuracies. We utilize that for the COG funding formula, and I know the municipalities utilize it for other grants and other things that you might be applying for. And the next census will be in 2030, so that's the next opportunity to have a complete count of our population, barring any special census that might be pursued. But hopefully we won't have any major catastrophes happen in 2030, and it will be an accurate count. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Any questions about this?
I have one question about the
Mr.
Penn
Cervello?
State population, Mr. Chair. When they say, they're talking about Penn State population with regard to this particular presentation or report, Mark, is that a Penn State population, Penn State wide, or just Penn State population for University Park?
Just University Park, yeah. We took all the other campuses and World Campus out, so it's
Okay.
just University Park enrollment.
All right, thank you.
Betsy, Ms. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Mr. Buckle. So at the Lucy Committee, I remember you mentioned I had asked about a correction factor, and that might be in the works, and that would maybe be at the Census Bureau level, but I'm thinking about planning for Patton Township and other municipalities. Would there be a correction factor available for municipalities should they feel the need to use that going forward, projecting for costs?
I think that's a question of methodology that would have to be developed. There's not going to be a correction factor that's just made available, unfortunately. The Census Bureau is not going to provide something at the municipal level. I don't even know that they've really gone out of their way to recognize that this issue has occurred in a lot of college communities. So any type of correction factor would have to be something probably locally generated.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions about this? I know that we actually discussed in the borough whether we would appeal this because we did feel very strongly that we were undercounted. And I more or less agree with that opinion, that we and probably other college communities were strongly undercounted in the census, but we kind of decided it wasn't worth it in terms of the federal money we'd get out of it.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, go.
I think the planning agency ought to consider some kind of rough adjustment just for our own purposes, because it does impact how we plan both as a region and as individual municipalities. I think, you could look at, for example, what Penn State's population, student population was during that period of time. They must know how many people were on campus or have a rough estimate. And I'm not talking precision. I'm talking about ballpark estimates.
Sure.
So I think we could make that adjustment versus where we are now in terms of student population and add that in. 2 cents.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think it's something definitely in the population forecasting project that could be included in there is to try to come up with a reasonable estimate of what we think the population should have been in 2020. Obviously, it won't carry forward any type of application municipalities want to make for funding, but it could be valuable to the region in terms of planning.
I wonder if our Penn State rep is on Zoom anywhere and might be willing to comment on this issue, or might want to comment on it.
Not yet.
Not yet. Then we can wait for the university report and ask them. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And,
Thank you.
and thank you for the service you've provided us over the years.
You bet. Thank you.
All right. Next is what I would call a 6-step process for considering public hearings on the amended and restated regional growth boundary and sewer service area, and we will start with a presentation from Mr. May.
Thank you. I just have a very brief presentation this evening before we go into the 6-step process. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of doing that before, it's easiest for us to break into individual municipal public meetings, and Mr. Barlow will expound on that in just a moment. So what I wanted to do to start off was talk a little bit about why we have this growth boundary sewer service area implementation agreement. And I kind of wanted to just go back to the big picture. Historically, this region has wanted to try to direct higher density and intense development into certain areas of the community, and that goes back to when we first developed a comprehensive plan in the 70s. There was also a big effort to preserve farmland, to preserve communities that wanted to remain rural, utilize the best of the infrastructure the best we can in the community, and also align growth with the capacity at the University Area Joint Authority, among other things. And this really required what's called an intergovernmental agreement under the Municipalities Planning Code, where all 6 municipalities agree on how we're going to operate this growth boundary sewer service area so we can attain the regional goals that the community wants. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are today and how this has been working for us. Most new building permits are issued inside the growth boundary and sewer service area. We obviously have development outside, but it's mostly low density, single family type development. Every 5 years, we also take a look at how much development capacity is located inside the growth boundary and sewer service area. And currently, it's adequate to serve both residential and non-residential growth for quite a few years moving forward. We also work in conjunction with the UAJA in terms of how much capacity they have and how quickly we're growing. And right now, they have over 10 million gallons of capacity on a daily basis, and they're using about half of that. So there's quite a bit of capacity at the UAJA as well. We also use this to protect source water areas. So some of you who might be in a municipality that you're not close to a well, you can know that the other municipalities, through their ordinances and through the growth boundary, are trying to protect those areas in the future to make sure that we have sufficient drinking water. Obviously, we're also preserving farmland and open areas. And as I mentioned before, this implementation agreement has helped all the municipalities implement the regional goals, and that's really kind of what I wanted to touch on tonight. So in terms of the existing agreement, it's meant to be a pretty rigorous process. There's a lot that a person who requests an expansion of the growth boundary has to go through in order to get into this process. The first time we amended this, we also removed the what's called the development of regional impact inside the growth boundary. That's where we wanted to grow as a region, so we didn't require this process to occur inside the growth boundary sewer service area. It's a little bit complicated because we don't have many of those, and for those of you who have been on your governing body for just a little while or a few years, probably hasn't seen one of these come through. So it doesn't happen that frequently, so I know it's can be a little bit confusing, and you might not be sure what I'm talking about, but once you have one of these, you'll know what it's like. And then finally, I wanted to get into the specifics of the agreement and basically what has stayed the same and what's changed. one of the things that was important to the municipalities was that they have the authority at the beginning of the process to decide if a request to expand the growth boundary sewer service area should move forward. So if there's a request in your municipality, that person will come to your governing body and request to expand the growth boundary. If you don't agree with that, you can stop the process at that point. If you agree with it and you think it has merit, it will move up to a review at the regional level. And again, all municipalities participate at the general forum level, and 5 municipalities are needed to approve a request to expand the growth boundary in the sewer service area. This evening, it has to be a unanimous vote in terms of changing the implementation agreement, but for a request to expand, it's only 5. So the proposed changes that we have, I'm happy to report, were not substantial. We basically cleaned up, you can go to the next slide, Scott, cleaned up what was going on in the agreement. We moved some of the exceptions up to the front. We took out some of the language that talked about why we were doing this and created another document that's available on our website, and that's the RGB and SSA at a glance document that tells you everything you need to know about that. And we deleted what was called the limited review process and reauthorized a process that allows the municipalities to do a growth boundary expansion at the local level in the next 5-year period that would allow an expansion of up to 12 acres and 60 equivalent dwelling units. So that provides some flexibility for the municipalities to do smaller projects without having come up to the general forum. So that's my presentation in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions, take any comments, or clarify anything before we get into the process.
Questions from anyone? I mean, do you, my question is, do you have a sort of a picture of where we're expanding the growth boundary in this iteration?
We're not expanding the growth boundary anywhere in this.
Oh, okay.
We are just amending the agreement and changing the language.
Oh,
but
okay, so
there's no physical expansion.
So this is just an agreement to expand it. Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Thompson?
Yes, on the agreement in page 9 of 10, section 8, item 2A, the first paragraph, last sentence, the Lucy Committee got misspelled infrastructure instead of infrastructure.
Yeah, okay. We can get that corrected, and I will get the right
That
language
was
to
the
your
only thing I
manager.
noticed.
Thanks for reading that, Jeremy. That was great.
I was using my reader again, and it's very good at saying things that don't quite fit right.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Cervello?
This is an amendment to the plan. Not-
It's an amendment to the implementation agreement. We're
Not an
required.
expansion.
No, there's no expansion. This is just a change in the language in the agreement to update some of that, but we're not doing any physical expansion of the growth boundary at all.
Just to clarify, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the general forum? Okay. Ms. Christian Cuddy.
Thank you for that presentation. I just had a clarifying question. The idea of what's a minor request that can be authorized by municipalities, could you clarify that a bit?
Certainly. Part of the implementation agreement was to review projects that would have an impact on more than one municipality. And generally speaking, a project that's 12 acres and up to 60 dwelling units or equivalent dwelling units would not have an adverse impact on any adjacent municipalities. So the first time we included that in the agreement, the municipalities wanted a little flexibility to do that to make the process go a little bit shorter for smaller projects.
Other questions? All right. Seeing no other questions from the general forum, I shall proceed with a public hearing. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak up on this matter? Please raise your hand if you are on Zoom or here physically. Seeing or hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Now, the general forum, actually, I did this in the wrong order.
That's fine. You're right.
Yeah, but is there any further discussion by anyone? If not, we will take a recess to you. There are these phone numbers in the back of on page 16 of your agenda,
And on the screen?
and on the screen, even better, which if you need to get in contact with any of the folks here who are on Zoom to caucus and vote on this amendment.
And if Mr. Chair, if I just may say that we have to have governing body public hearings because this is an ordinance that you're adopting at one of your meetings, so you have to call your own meeting to do that.
So we have to have a public hearing at our meetings.
Yes,
At
you
the
have to
next
open and
meeting.
close a public, yeah.
So, but we have to caucus now to agree to.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
To adopt the ordinance, you need to be
All right.
a municipal meeting.
So all of you caucus, and just about everybody, every municipality except mine has a quorum right here, I've noticed. And I will get on, so municipal chairs, please get your caucuses together and in about 5 minutes, come back here and report your votes. I'm going to go out in the hall and call my colleagues. Is there anybody, is every municipality done?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, they're all, okay. I guess we have to ask for everyone. Hello, I don't like to, okay. My new toy, anyway. Now, I guess we go around the room. Should I, do you want to call it, Scott?
State College Borough,
7-0, yes, or 5-0, yes.
College Township. All in favor? Ferguson Township.
All in favor as well.
Half Moon Township.
All in favor.
Harris Township.
All in favor.
And Patrick Township.
All in favor.
Okay, that's essentially 6-0. That's like a good Penn State football score. Anyway. So, all right. Now, we've been through I guess this is our first one of these this year, isn't it? Unit votes. Okay, on to the next item. Classification and compensation study, Mr. Norenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll kick things off, and then we'll have feedback and information from some of the committee chairs that have been involved in this effort. But just as a reminder to everybody that in May of 2022, the General Forum authorized and then staff began work on the first classification and compensation study in over 17 years. That led to quite a lot of work on the part of interviewing staff and staff completing job assessment questionnaires, and a lot of detailed analysis was done. And a few months ago, we began presentations to COG committees. Fast forward to July, at the July General Forum meeting, members received a presentation on the classification and compensation study, and staff presented as well a draft implementation plan. There was feedback and discussion, and ultimately the General Forum voted to receive the classification and compensation study and the draft implementation plan, but requested that the Finance Committee continue to work with staff to develop an implementation plan to be considered by the General Forum. Since that meeting a month ago, staff worked with the Finance Committee to develop 4 different scenarios that were looked at, including a do-nothing scenario, and those scenarios are included in your packet of materials for tonight. Those 4 scenarios were discussed and evaluated. The previous and new scenarios were updated to include relevant employee-related expenses such as taxes, retirement, et cetera, that would vary along with the market adjustments. During that meeting, members of the Finance Committee were asked if they had any additional scenarios they wanted to offer for consideration, and they were also invited to propose amendments or revisions to the 4 scenarios that were presented. Following extensive discussion, the Finance Committee agreed to recommend scenario 4, the even allocation scenario that is in your packet. That scenario would provide for an 18.5% adjustment equally for all of the staff who are under market with the first payroll in November of this year. Then they would receive half of the balance due starting with the first pay in January 2024, and the remaining half of the balance with the first payroll in January 2025. In your packet on page 8 is the phased cost of that implementation strategy shown in a table at the top of page 8. There was discussion during the course of debating that motion, and the committee decided to not reflect use of insurance or reserve funds at this time, except for that has already been budgeted for 2023. So the numbers that you see there are the actual projected costs, and as was presented to you during the course of presentations, we know that these are pretty close to the numbers we expect, but we know things could change as somebody resigns or comes and goes, and things change. But we expect that those are the numbers that we would see at the implementation at each of those three stages. Ultimately, the Finance Committee agreed to an amended motion that recommends scenario 4, but only using the numbers shown, again, with the exception of using the budgeted $50,000 in insurance reserves that are in the 2023 budget, and holding on to a decision regarding the use of insurance reserve until during the budget process, during which time the Finance Committee would evaluate that and make a recommendation to the General Forum. So in your packet is a table that shows, it's labeled 9A, which is scenario 4, the recommended phasing scenario even allocation. And then with that, the Executive Committee forwarded this motion on to the General Forum. So I could pause there, Mr. Chair, and see if either the Chair of the Finance Committee or the Chair of the HR Committee have anything else to add to the discussion, anything else that I might have missed, or any enhancements they'd like to make to this before we open it up to discussion.
Mr. Frank or Mr. Best, do either of you have a comment to add?
I don't have any comments.
Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the Executive Director shared, the Finance Committee was tasked by the General Forum with working with staff to determine a potential implementation plan for the study, not necessarily the study itself. I personally believe that to be the HR and General Forum's turf. But with that said, my personal take on the study was that it was conducted professionally and used as good a methodology as possible with the unique nature of our COG and the positions within it. I appreciated the inclusive nature, as I feel there are few things worse than people making recommendations on your job who have no idea what your job is or incorporates. Based on the General Forum tasking, I believe our committee and staff's goal was to find a reasonable and manageable implementation that was fair to staff without pushing any municipal budgets / managers into a coronary. As Ms. Strickland reminded the Executive Committee, the adoption of a budget guideline this year also needs to be factored into any implementation plan. Staff put the various scenarios on a level playing field and presented each. Questions were asked about each, then we went around the table identifying each finance member's top 2. The initial tally had us then hone in on the top 2 overall, which were options 3 and 4. Further discussion and an amended motion resulted in the 4-2 recommendation for option 4 before you. The other 2 votes, I believe, were in favor of do nothing, or a variation of option 4 that directed staff on how to implement the plan. To confirm, the amendment was to analyze the recommendations solely on its true versus net cost. I appreciated that approach, as generally finance is asked after something has been approved, how are we going to pay for this? I do believe insurance reserves, which are really refunded municipal and staff dollars, will factor into easing the transition for municipal budgets, and that Finance Committee and staff are up to the task of determining exactly how should this be approved. Pending any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Any questions for anyone in this process? Mr. Graham.
I don't have a question. I have something to add to this. Mr. Frank alluded to that there was a 4-2 decision, and I voted against it, but I voted for number 4. And I want to bring something up here that maybe we can work this out in Finance Committee during budget time or whatever. I don't know if it needs to be amendment, but this is just a discussion item. And I looked at number 4, and we know we're paying so much money. We're paying a total of whatever it is, but that we agreed, pretty much all agree that it's going to cost us, if we implement this, a certain amount of money. I think it's 500 and something. But my thinking here is that I noticed that of the 14 tiers or 14 levels or whatever they are, the first 4 stood out to me as interesting, because those are the ones that are going to be hit the most with let's face it, we're at higher prices with everything. And I don't know if we're in inflation, I'm not sure what we're officially calling this, but everything is more expensive. And in those first 4 levels were hit the most, hit harder than anybody else because of the level of income. And so my suggestion was, or I think he is, that we take those first 1 through 4 groups and give them their full compensation the first year. And that would do 2 things. That would they're the ones who hit the most with the higher prices because of the level of income. And also in recruitment, we're talking about recruitment. Those first 4 levels are going to be the hardest to recruit because there are help, there are part-time help, there are seasonal help. They are people that are probably going to be hard to recruit at that present level of income. So it would accomplish 2 things. It would accomplish the fact that it would bring them up right away, which they're hurt the most, other than the top 5 through 14, and it would help in recruitment. So I suggest that, and you pay the same, except for the 20, and I want to thank Eric and Becca. Becca sat down with this on a Friday afternoon, and she went through this. She provided these facts for me, went through a few of them. We saw where the level was. It seemed like level 4 was where the point is where they would really be affected right away. So she thanks her for that, and she printed this out for me. I don't know what the figures are, but what would happen is the first year would be less, and then it would increase the 24 and 25 more, but you would pay the same amount in the long run. So I don't know if we want to look at those figures, and there's another thing about this too. This isn't only a promotion. This is not only a salary adjustment or equity, it's some promotions. Well, apparently we have some employees that have been working below their level. They've had more responsibilities, and this is going to bring them up. So this would be promotions, including here be some promotions, but so that kind of offsets the fact that everybody is trying to bring up even. We're bringing some people up to where they should have been before. So that's my comment. I don't know if we want to make an amendment or want to wait till the finance. It's all under level 4. I agree with level 4 with the amount. I just think that we should adjust the rate, just the timing on it a little bit.
Mr. Graham, I have a question. Are you planning to propose an amendment then? Is that
Well,
what this
I don't
is?
know. I didn't know how to approach this. I just was going to discuss it and bring it up.
Yeah,
Whether we could amend, we have to amend it or wait till the budget session, till we discuss it. It's the same amount of money over the same length of time.
Well, what I'm asking is if you're going to do that, we should have a motion and then have an amendment.
This would be an amendment?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. Mr. Frank.
Mr. Chair, I would just offer, Mr. Graham brought that up at Finance Committee and everything. I can only speak for myself on those. In theory and in principle, I absolutely agree. I understand where you're going. My 2 concerns with it were, we don't know each employee's individual circumstances. We may have people in classification 5 that are in a different situation, 1 through 4. And so I don't want to get into that. The second part is that I feel that we're getting into the executive director and the HR director's turf in deciding this, and that they have expressed a desire for consistency across the COG, and I certainly do understand that. And everything. So out of respect for their feelings on that, that was, personally why I couldn't support that little difference between the presented option 4 and the amended.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Savella.
With all due respect, I had asked that the executive committee, I believe I mentioned it also at the finance committee, with regard to the approval of the plan prior to the approval of the implementation of the plan or the various scenarios for implementation. I think review of the plan and content itself and dialogue or debate about the plan itself and the contents would have gone a long way in understanding or discussing or debating the methods of applying the plan or how the plan applies to the various levels that have been determined or established through this study. And when you get to the issue of weighting lower rankings or lower grades with the higher grades and trying to apply some form of allowance for the lower grades to be accelerated compared to the higher grades, which is what I think Bud's referring to, Mr. Graham is referring to. That is something that really should be determined before you determine method of implementation. Unless method of implementation itself is, part of the consideration of methods of implementation are adjustment of grades, depending on the grade levels, how you apply the changes to each of the grades. So, I mean, and I asked the question before in the executive committee, I know at least, about whether the plan itself was subject to approval prior to discussing methods of implementation. So, just wanted to point that out.
Mr. Marshall. Peter?
You're muted, Peter.
On a personal basis, I support the idea that the lowest grades get their full increase. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Any other comments, Mr. Harden?
Yeah, I don't like any of the scenarios. This is a management situation. We got here because of management. Management has paid the people over the years. The HR committee, the finance committee, the executive committee, and the general forum, none of us know each individual and their situation and who's in dire strait, who's not in dire strait. But the agency directors do. The executive director does. Right now, we're at 42% of our budget is payroll. So I think what we need to do is we say, we're gonna up it to 42.3% or 42.4%, whatever that number is. Our job's to fund it. The job of call it divvying out or taking care of employees, that's the manager's jobs, whether it's the agency managers, the executive director, that's their job. We don't need to get down in the weeds here and discuss all that. All we need to do is come up with a number that we're going to increase payroll by next year and let management deal with it. And if it keeps coming back, then we have to have a serious discussion with management. But I don't think we need to sit here and talk about which grade and which person gets what and which category gets this and that, because that just puts us in the weeds and we're doing the manager's job. The job is let the managers do it. We're just going to come in and say, okay, we'll give you this much more to implement this and make it work. We just need to stay out of it. Our job is to fund it. Our job is not to manage the day-to-day people, and that's just the way I felt about it. I said it in the executive committee, and I'll say it again here. I'm not going to vote for any scenario because I can't see anything that we don't need to be doing this. We need to just fund the problem. We fund the problem, they take care of it. And that's the way I feel.
Other comments? Mr. Piper.
Yeah, I think the long-term costs of this proposed plan are going to be phenomenal on this organization. And it just seems like there's a lot of room in here for expansion of employees, expansion of benefits, expansion of pay. And I think once you start that ball rolling, you're not going to get it under control. So I'm against it the way it's set up now. I could see pay for if Mr. Norberg thinks certain employees are doing certain jobs and they need to be rewarded, then I'd say by all means. But just to give it across the board, pay raises and bonuses, I can't justify that. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Woodward.
Thank you. I am part of the HR committee, and I very vocally expressed my concerns at the first meeting when this was rolled out. We had a meeting with Becca and Eric on a Thursday. We received the report at 5 o'clock on Friday, and we had our HR meeting at 12:15 on Wednesday. So we had more or less 2.5 days to look at this. And I expressed my concerns at the time, and some of them had been covered at the time. Most of them are still up in the air, but the process continued. I was assured that the Finance Committee would look at this with a fine-tooth comb. I was told because we paid for the study, we needed to use it. I got answers, and part of my question is about the taxpayers too, who is funding this, because this is an animal that just continues to grow. And we are ultimately held responsible by our neighbors and our citizens that are paying our wages and the COG's wages. And I don't know that they have been considered at all.
There are two hands up. I guess Mr. Abrams and then Ms. Evans.
I take a very simplistic view of this, that we have various committees on the COG, and I think each of the committees has intelligent people on it who try to make the best decisions. And we have a finance committee that just voted a majority to go with a particular plan. I could spend a lot of time second guessing it, as everyone else could, but that's not the way we've generally done it. Maybe we need to change the whole structure of the COG, that there aren't any committees, that there are no specialties. But I think that if the HR committee and the finance committee come up with a plan, and to me that makes sense, I say we should go with it. I understand the other concerns. We don't have an endless supply of money, but I haven't had a single taxpayer that come up to me and say we're spending too much money and that we're not providing the kind of services that are needed for our people.
Yeah.
And with the staff that we have, we know that the cost of the people is going to be the highest because of your quality people. If they weren't, then we could hire anybody off the street and fill a position. That's not what we do. And so I'm in favor of the plan as proposed by finance.
Ms. Evans.
I take quite a different view to Elliot. I see these committees as advisory to the COG and advisory to the employees of COG. And by COG the first time I meant you guys, the elected officials. I also agree with what Frank Harden said, that the manager, the COG manager, I'm sorry Eric, I forget the official title, should take the budget he's given, or he's given, and do with it what needs to be done to make COG effective. And if that means giving pay raises to a lot of people, then he makes those decisions and other things don't get funded as highly. That's what we all do. I run one of the institutes on campus, and that's what I've had to do, along with the new compensation and classification thing as well. So that's my thing. The manager makes the decision on the budget he's given, and the committees are advisory to the manager and to all of you.
Other comments from members of the General Forum on this issue? Mr. Thompson.
Yes, a few things I wanted to share. I think the employee input and feedback in the study was a great practice. It provided the consultant with a great resource to gather information to conduct the study that was necessary for implementation recommendations. Without that employee input, I think the effectiveness of the study could have been minimalized and led to negative implications. As for employees, knowing the market and their knowledge of the market, absent of this study, there is a growing number of online resources where employees can access and compare their salary to that of the market. The nice thing about this study is it's a personalized and professional guide for the COG to implement such study. And I would just reiterate, the cost of turnover can be very significant. It could cost thousands of dollars for any employee that leaves, considering the amount of time it takes to replace them through the recruitment and the interview process and any training and other certifications. So I think if we decide to do nothing, that would be just fiscally irresponsible of us. And that's my feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Ms. Whitman.
I'd just like to say, hear, hear.
Yeah.
To what Jeremy said. Thank you.
And Mr. Norberg.
I'd like to just maybe address a couple of things. You know, my remarks earlier this evening started with where we were after last month's meeting. I did not intentionally, I did not go through and rehash and re-present the purpose of the study and the findings of the study, and I appreciate Mr. Thompson's bringing us back to that point. The reason we did this classification and compensation study was because we knew that we had a number of staff at the COG who are underpaid in comparison with the market. The study showed approximately 69 staff are paid under market, and that's an equity issue, it's a retention issue, it's a recruitment issue, and that's where we're having challenges. And so staff's opinion, my recommendation, and I think the opinion of a number of you who spoke up at the last meeting or in committee meetings, is we should be trying to pay all of our staff competitive wages at the market based on the market comparison study that was done. This is not an across-the-board adjustment at all. There are a number of staff who will be left at their current levels because they are currently within the appropriate range for their classification. So the original recommendation, the original implementation plan for the study that was presented back in July is to bring everybody up to market in November and then carry forward into the next couple of years with everybody at the market, and then deal with other needs that we have for staff, and that would include addressing wage compression in the future years. But the recommendation that's before you, option 4, would be a phased approach, and so that means, you know, again, as I mentioned earlier, and as is clear in your packet, this will be 18% in the first year, 18.5% in November, and then the remainder split between January 24 and January 25. That phased approach means that the staff who are under market are bearing the burden of not being up to market during that phasing. So they'll have to wait longer to get brought up to market, and hopefully we can weather the risks that Mr. Thompson noted, because these are the employees, the staff that support all of the municipalities, and these are the staff that, when people compliment municipal officials about the great parks and recreation programs and the great operations of the library and the great service provided by fire and other programs of the COG, we have great employees everywhere, and I'm really proud of all of them, but it's disappointing that this gets so difficult to move forward because of the dollars and cents. And the dollars and cents and the opportunity that's in front of you in option 4 will be borne on the back of those employees who are not going to be up to market as soon as the others who are already at the market. And so while I think we can live with option 4, the original option that was recommended would be to bring everybody up to market in November, and that was the recommendation Becca and I brought forward in November, in July, and that's still our preferred, but we think that option 4 is a good compromise if that's the will of the general forum.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Marshall's hand's up. Go ahead, Peter.
I looked carefully at this study, and I thought it was well done. That's typically how you determine whether public employees are at market rates, being paid fairly. One comment, though, I do think that Mr. Graham's suggestion was appropriate because the study was given to us to look at. I assume that if one of us found something that was not correct or it didn't lie, they could make a suggestion. So I think Mr. Graham's suggestion was perfectly okay. I think the study was perfectly okay. And I think the COG needs to move forward with this.
Mr. Savella, you had a comment?
I was referring to Mr. Magruder. I thought he had a question or a comment.
Did you have a, Mr. Magruder?
But I think he's rescinded.
Lots of thoughts racing through my head. I appreciate all the discussion on this. I do want to make, I think I do want to make clear though that this is, we've had this for about 2 months or so. And so I think as elected officials, we did have the opportunity to be able to inquire about this study and look critically at it. And as far as its, or the public's sort of like ability to be able to chime in on this and understand this, I think it was ample enough time. And so I just want to make clear, I don't want it to seem as though the stuff was done, you know, behind closed doors without the ability to have sort of like input on it, and this is what we're doing right now. But for, I think, so I also wanted to get back to the point of if we did, as a governing body, provide just a number, how easy is that to do without understanding the actual process of implementation? So if we just provided you a dollar sign and said, divvy it up and figure it out, I'm wondering, is that an easy process, or do you actually have to understand what your process for allocating is before?
That would be a complete revamp of our budgeting process, one that is currently, you know, shaped by the program plan, for example, and the review that we conduct of staff developing, you know, budgets for review by the finance committee. If we were to say we need 8% more to do just the current level, which I think is approximately what the formula for the new guideline would be, you know, that would be an increase, but that would cover a lot of things. It wouldn't cover the you know, all of the costs in a way that would enable, you know, the elected officials to give the kind of review that we currently do. If we wanted to revamp the budget process, I think we should take time to carefully review and consider what is, you know, what is the role, what should the role be of all of the COG committees in reviewing the changes that might come along with that. There's a lot that would, you know, changing gears in the middle of the budget process to do something like that, I think might have some unintended consequences.
And so I think I asked that because it seems like it would be a pretty complex process to go that route. And so for me, I think it's, we have a role to play in, you know, the monies that are allocated, and I think providing some type of framework for the process of allocation. I think we have a part in that. I do agree with like getting into the minutia of who exactly, what job titles should or should not be getting monies. I do think that's up to sort of like management, but yeah, I wouldn't want to totally be cut off in this process of helping to provide some type of framework, which I think whether or not we love option scenario 4, I think that provides some type of framework. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lord?
I'm wondering, how binding is this motion? We have 3 budget years. Question. We have 2023, the one we're currently in, and we have a budget. I guess there would be a process for using the insurance reserves or whatever to deal with that. Then we're going to be presented with a budget for 2024. And we're going to vote on that, and may feel like we need to make amendments. Does this mean that we're stuck with this for 2024 if we pass this? And what about 2025? We haven't written that budget yet. Does this mean that we have to increase it again in 2025, that we're obligated to do it, or do we have any choice in the matter? I mean, how binding is this? Do we need to, what does this do? Other than say, maybe this is the intent.
I can give my opinion and then ask for the opinion of the chair or vice versa. My opinion is, your implementation of or approval of this scenario for implementation would be the strategy that is approved and blessed by the entire general forum, and that it would be up to staff and the finance committee to carry forward with it. Those numbers are going to shift and change due to resignations, hiring, things that are maybe within or without our control. But the phasing is something that I think if the general forum is going to approve a phasing plan, employees need to be able to count on it and know for certain what is intended and what is being promised by this motion. How the funding happens behind this, what the source of funds would be, I think would be still part of the conversation that the finance committee would have.
Rich looked like he had a comment.
The second part, so for 2023, 50,000 was already put in the budget to go towards it. So no budget amendment is currently required at that amount and under scenario 4. 2024, I think what you're asking is, this is somewhat setting the floor, that this is all things equal, this is what we're seeing is going to happen. Could the general forum say, I want to do it all in 2024? Sure. Could they say, we don't want to do any of it in 2024? I think that would be an incredible disservice. So, I mean, I think it'll set an expectation, and then we can always exceed expectations. That's my take.
Let's see, did you have a comment? And then I'll ask you to comment. Go ahead. Mr. Gracie Griffin.
For me.
So one of the things, if I'm reading this correctly, in the scenario that's being presented to us.
Could you speak up just a little
Sorry.
bit?
When I'm looking at the scenario that's been presented to us, one of the assumptions that's baked into it is that the funding for this is going to come from new municipal share dollars that each of our municipalities is going to contribute. My question is, was it discussed that there could be ways to find efficiencies elsewhere in the budget to help pay for this rather than it just coming from new municipal dollars?
Sure.
I think so.
My understanding, having worked, we do have I don't really want to put her on the hook yet, but having worked with finance directors before, is they're always looking for opportunities of saving as well as making other resources and stuff. The big thing you can go back to, when we talk about cutting things or cutting costs or whatever, if you look outside of payroll on the COG, that it's not that big of a number outside of that, and we're pretty bare that no one appears to be living extravagantly and everything. So when you're talking personnel, we're talking cutting people which are tied to programs, and this body has gone through an exercise before of, okay, what should we not be doing that we're currently doing? And the answer was nothing. The answer was we need to be doing more and everything. Unfortunately, that has been borne by the same staff just doing more and everything. So here's an opportunity to say, we see you, we see what you've been doing and everything. So I think the new finance director is going to follow the COG mantra and be looking for places to cut where they can be cut without costing service.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that we talked a lot about funding. I don't think we really talked too much about cost and cost projections, because I do think that the cost of this is not yet determined. There are some basic costs for near-term implementation, but long-term, there's a lot of factors in this study, in this plan, that will affect cost over time. That really hasn't been, I don't believe it has been, in my experience here, been discussed in depth. So that cost is borne by the municipalities, unless a fixed budget is provided and the COG administration balances the spending in order to accommodate whatever their mission is or whatever they need to accomplish. So within a fixed budget. Without a fixed budget, the cost floats.
Other comments from members of the general forum? Ms. Whitman? Someone needs to make a motion.
Mr. Chair, I call for a unit vote.
Okay, unit vote. Someone still needs to make a motion. Are you making the motion?
What's the motion?
Well, I just move that the general forum approves scenario 4, even allocation to implement the results of the classification and compensation study.
Is there a second?
I second.
Second. Now we ask for comments from the public. Are there any comments from the public? Hearing and seeing none, we're going to a unit vote. Yes, go ahead.
Well, this may be the time to, hate to add as an amendment, but I think that I'd like to put, I agree with, apparently this motion is, if it's passed, we'll be spending the full amount of money that's been requested for there over the 3 years. I don't want to change that, but I'd like to some leeway in there. I still think that our that lower one, what's 1 through 4 or 5. To me, when Beck and I looked at it, was 4. But maybe leeway in there to fully compensate the lower group, which are going to be hard to recruit, and they're the ones who hit most by the way things are going now. For them to wait, for someone in grade 1, 2, and 3 to wait 3 years to get up to pay, that's going to be a much more sacrifice than would be to anybody, any of the other ones. So somehow, I don't know, have to offer amendment that we could adjust that during our finance committee meetings. We could, if we need to, or I'll make amendment that we fund all 1 through 4 through. I don't know which way to go on this. I don't want to be set in stone on it, but I think we need to have some leeway on this, and I don't know why. Need some help in formulating a motion on that.
Mr. Nuremberg?
Mr. Graham has brought up his suggestion a couple of times, and I thought I would share, because we did appreciate Bud coming in to talk to Becca and myself, and then Becca and the previous, or our interim finance director, Jennifer. They did a lot of work to come up with some numbers, so I might as well share the same numbers that Bud received with everybody. To implement the strategy that Bud suggested, Mr. Graham suggested, would cost $122,302 in 2023. That's versus the $50,000 that was shown in your agenda packet. And then in the 2024 and 2025, it would be approximately $74,000 each of those years with the revised phasing. So it front loads that cost and those market adjustments, but everybody above those tiers, above 5 and above, would still get the same percentages that were talked about in the original proposal, option 4, but it covers the lower tiers as Mr. Graham suggested. Staff still have some concerns about the equity of that not being equal, and we still feel that, at least I do, and I think Becca agrees, that we see challenges in recruiting and retention at all levels, not just in the lower levels. But we appreciate the spirit in which Mr. Graham came in to visit with us and try and come up with an alternative. So at least I wanted to share those numbers with you all.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I add to that as well? One of the things I don't disagree with where Bud is coming, and we spoke with the Finance Committee on some of this as well. Like, not necessarily because they're the lower paid are being hit harder, but it's important to keep in mind that some of those part-time positions or hourly positions or seasonal positions are also students, high school students. Some of them work part-time because their spouses work full-time and they don't necessarily need a full-time position. Some of our higher paid positions that are needing an adjustment might be a single parent. We can't think about that and know how people are spending their money or living day to day. But there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and that's why we felt the even allocation was fair to everybody across the board, not just a certain category. So I think if you're heading into to talk about those things, that you want to consider that as well, not just that they may be being hit the hardest. That may not necessarily be true.
Mr. Best.
I just want to add a comment to that. It just seems likely to me too that if we were to essentially hit the lower four, if you will, that our cost turnover would be riskier and it would be a higher cost. So not only would we be having a higher cost in year zero, we have a higher risk and a higher cost of turnover because those employees that are above four cost more.
I'm not suggesting we give them any less. They're going to get their same adjustment regardless. They're going to get it's going to be, their adjustment is going to be the same if this motion passes, regardless of what we do with our lower paid employees. So it doesn't affect anybody else at all. They still will get their 3-year adjustment. They suggested, I think it's important we look out for our younger employees, not younger, they're younger whether they are or not, or pages for the library. Those are the ones we have tough to recruit. Those are going to be the hard to find, hard workers to find. I brought up the fact there at the time that there's a tire company in State College that is having a tough time finding people to change tires at $27 an hour. You can't keep them for 3 days. So recruitment is important, yes, but I think they are the ones that are going to be hit the most. So I think we should think about them first. All the other employees are still going to get the same increments from 23, 4, and 5. Now, I know it's confusing. I know it sounds wacky, but I just think that would be important for us to do that. Those are employees. We run on our employees. Anybody that has any knowledge of business, right? You run on your employees. They're important. Take care of them, and we're taking care of all of them for 3 years. But the younger ones, either the lower paid ones, they're going to hit most. So that's my speech. I don't want to make an amendment. Maybe I can make an amendment that says that we can allow our director to have a little bit of discretion when it comes to, or let the finance committee have a little bit of discretion on this thing when it comes to budget session time. I don't know what.
Well, if you're making that an amendment, it requires.
Well, okay. Well, what the heck? I move that I'd like to make an amendment that we allow the finance committee to look at this formula and feel that if we feel that the lower ones need more adjustment, then we should do that.
Is anyone wish to second it?
I'll second it.
It is moved and seconded. So we now have an amendment being discussed. The procedure would be that we would have to first do the unit vote on the amendment and then come back.
And was the unit vote called on the amendment?
No, I guess it isn't.
How can we amend something we haven't voted on?
Well, I want to amend the motion.
You want to amend the motion? Okay.
We have to.
If it fails, then we'll go on.
Any further discussion on the amendment?
We can vote on it without a unit vote.
Mr.
I
Hard.
just have a comment, and I'm going to take us all back 1 year. If you remember last year, we were presented with a budget that was what, 18, 19%, something increase? And now we're talking about increasing this and increasing that. I would like to know, do we have any kind of idea of what the budget, without this, what the budget is going to go up this year? And if you want me to vote on something like this, I want to see a cap. I want to say, we're not going to raise the total budget more than 5 or 6%. You put that cap on, I'll vote for this. You don't put a cap on it, then I'm not voting for it. Because, you know, you're just saying there's an unlimited flow of money, and there's not. And all the people that are sitting here right now, and they're all sitting there going, well, this is great, we can do this, we got to take care, we got to do this, we got to add that, we got to add that. Remember, when you're sitting in your own township, and it comes time, and you got to raise taxes, 0.5 mils, or whatever you've got to raise them, just remember, this is going to directly influence what you do in your township. So just keep that in mind. But if we know what the total budget is going to be, I would like to know that number before I approve something like
Are you
this.
talking about the amendment or the general?
Well, I guess I want comments on the amendment first before we vote on the amendment. Any other comments on the amendment, not on the, Mr. Marshall? Oh, you need to unmute, Peter.
What did you ask?
Any more comments on the amendment, not on the entire motion, on the amendment? Your hand's up, Peter. Is that what did
If
you?
you're looking for a comment from me.
You have your hand up.
Oh, it is? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. It's okay, Peter. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Ms. Robb.
I just have a question. We're assuming that our colleagues on the Finance Committee have not even thought of any of this. I think they've done a thorough job. I hope they've done a thorough job. I know for my colleague, Dan Trevino, who is also on the Finance Committee, he's also let our board know exactly what's going on. And I don't think any of us has questioned that this board last month voted unanimously to move it to finance. There was not one objection, not one, to move it to finance, because we believe our finance committee could review this and come up with a scenario that all of us would agree on. But now here we are reviewing what our finance committee has taken time out to review and thought of and reviewed over and over again. So as we're moving forward, I know each of us are looking at our employees and appreciating what they've done and how hard they work, and their families, whether they're single or whether they're a family, that we don't want the best for them. And the more that we take time out not moving this forward, they're suffering. So until we, as a group, decide to do the right thing and not delay this, we may not all have the right answers, but trust our finance committee. I know each has a representative there, and if they don't, I can guarantee you most of our elected officials have sat in on the finance committee. So, any questions, any suggestions you may have had, you made them. So let's move forward.
Mr. Cervello and then Mr. Piper.
Mr. Chair, the Finance Committee did not address the issue of the total budget. The budget discussions don't even occur for 2024 until later in late or 28th of September through October, various budget meetings that we are already scheduled. So in terms of the total budget for the COG, that hasn't even been discussed yet. The costs related, or some of the costs related to this classification compensation study have been discussed by the Finance Committee. But the comment earlier, the question, or the discussion earlier about the total budget for the COG for the coming years has not been discussed yet. And I thought that was the context of what we were discussing.
Actually, we're still on the amendment. I don't mean to, Mr. Piper and then Mr. Magruder.
I'd like to correct the wrong statement. At last month's COG meeting, Half Moon Township voted nay.
Did you?
We did.
Yeah, they did actually. Mr. Magruder? Okay. Any other comments on the amendment? As we have not asked for a unit vote on the amendment, I'm going to, I'll ask if there's any public comment on the amendment, but there doesn't seem to be any public. So then I'll ask for a vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Nay. I gather from that the nays have it. Okay, now we're going back to the original proposal unamended, and we are going to go through the unit vote process again, which means that each of you should confer with, the chairs here should confer with their caucuses, and I will have to go out in the hallway and call my caucus. I had one from Patton Township. Was this supposed to be before or after the vote, or? Before the vote. Before the vote. Mr. Abrams, go ahead and make your comment. I think.
The comment is that it might sound good to say that we should do the budget first and then decide on salary issue, but I think what happens is that the budget becomes the final thing we do at the end, after everything else is done. And so it's to say, okay, let's do the salaries later, doesn't make any sense to me, because we have to know what the whole, these are all pieces of the total budget. This is one piece, and it'll go into the final budget, but I don't think you hold up this piece just because you don't know what the whole budget is. You can't know what the whole budget is until you do all the pieces.
Mr. McGregor,
I think it's important too, in Patton, we've been consistently discussing this issue in our meetings, and we've made clear that this is something that's important. Maybe not for everybody, but it seems like for a lot of individuals here. And so because it's important, we want to make sure that it's done, but we've also called for then, once budget proposals are coming to us, to take into account that we're approving this, and so this may then need to offset some other areas of operations amongst the COG. And so I don't want to make it seem like we've just been adding without consideration of, potentially taking some things away.
Okay. I do want to limit comments, but if anybody wishes to address that, they are welcome to. Other than that, then I will get on with the reporting of the votes. Mr. Binkley.
On the motion to approve the motion by Ms. Whitman, State College Borough.
Yes, unanimously.
College Township.
Yes.
Ferguson Township.
Yes.
Half Moon Township.
No.
Harris Township.
Yes, 4-1.
3-2.
3-2, I'm sorry, 3-2.
And Patton Township.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
5 in favor, 1 against.
That's, 5-1. Does that?
Correct. That
That's
passes.
a 1-unit vote. The motion passed.
Motion
It did not
passes.
need to be unanimous.
It doesn't, this one does not need to be unanimous. Okay, before the reports, I just want to make a comment that today was the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I was there. I had the privilege of addressing it, but I don't think I was the most interesting person who spoke. There was a moving tribute to the late Harry Belafonte, who left us this year, by Charles Dumas, who happened to know him, and other moving speeches by others, including our mayor, and including a wonderful poem from a new professor of education that I enjoyed very much. It's always an interesting event to reflect on. I wasn't there, but I know people who were, including Mr. Dumas, and including a friend of mine from college, and some other folks I know. So now we will move on to the university report. Is Mr. Moore here?
No.
No, he is not here. That's easy. State College Area School District. Is anyone is Ms. Brandt here?
No.
No. Whitehall Road Regional Park Coordination Team Report. Mr. Frank is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to advise that this segment of the general forum agenda will very soon be a thing of the past, as I see the light at the end of the project. The last major item of contracted services, the paving of the entrance drive and other required areas, began last week, should finish up weather dependent this week. Following that, various small items that have been waiting on that to finish will occur, to include ongoing landscaping, railing, fencing, and final electric. Testing of the new playground area is in process. Project closeout will occur thereafter with installation of owner-supplied amenities and signage. A potential soft opening of the non-field assets in the late fall is being reviewed. One item of note, because of the severe storms over the past month, staff, with the assistance of Civil Contracting, have identified several areas in the park susceptible to stormwater damage and implemented proactive work to resolve those for the long haul. There remains a few other that they will be addressing as funds and contractor availability allow. In the memorandums of record with tonight's agenda are the August 11th, 23 project summary, Table 1 and Table 4, as reviewed by the authority at their August 17th, 23 meeting. As shown on Table 4, pending and potential changes are being whittled down in quantity and dollars. Pending any questions, Mr. Chair.
Any questions about the Whitehall Regional's park project? Only one comment from me. I am very glad that we can report that we are near the end of this, and that very soon people will be enjoying this park. Executive Director report, Mr. Norenberg.
Mr. Chair, the August activity report is in the packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions on items that are in the activity report and later on some of the items in the matters of record. But for now, I'll see if there are any questions on the activity report.
Any questions for the Executive Director?
And if not, would like to turn our moment over to Lisa Collins, who is the Director of the SCLO Center Region Library, for a quick update on the summer reading program that concluded a couple of weeks ago.
We are always looking forward to reports from the library.
Sounds good. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here real quick with all of you. There you go. So we had a wonderful summer reading program that we provided to all the members of your communities. And the numbers really do speak for themselves. For our program registrations from ages birth to 12 years, we had 1,660 kids that registered for the program, 777 adults and teens. May through July, our circulation was 149,285 physical items. When we talk about all of the people that matter so much, I can guarantee that each of those physical items was likely touched by a staff member. Either pulling the item, you can see that we pulled 18,924 reserve items for members of our community to pick up at the library, or to pick up at one of the libraries in the Center County Federation of Public Libraries. We processed 973 new library cards in 3 months. We had 56,036 definitely does matter, people that came through our front doors in those 3 months. And we're really excited for the partnership that we have with the YMCA, because we were able to provide 597 free lunches to children under the ages of 18. What I wanted to come back to you and show you is this incredible picture, because it's always about the people that are behind the services. This little girl named Ziggy, I know that many of you were here when Paula brought with her her giant unicorn. This is Ziggy with her unicorn. So she was the winner of the unicorn. It came full circle as we were describing the program. So she brought this home, she read books, and she brought home the stuffed unicorn, and that's the success of the summer reading program. The final thing that I wanted to leave you with tonight is that we have tickets that we give to the kids for the books that they read. And I asked our children's librarian, Paula Bannon, the head of Children's Services, how many tickets we went through this year. It's pretty amazing, 143,000 tickets. So what we're doing here is we're ensuring that so many kids went back to school reading on grade level or above the grade level that they were when they left. And that is a huge, huge accomplishment for everyone in our community. So I want to thank you for the support of SCLO Center Region Library. And thank you for helping us to get the word out about the importance of summer reading. It was an incredible program this year, and we're looking forward to doing it again next year for you.
Any questions of Ms. Collins? Okay. Authority, board, and committee reports. Executive Committee, Mr. Cervello.
I really don't have much to say other than that we did, the big issue was the classification compensation study. And there were some other issues acted on or voted on, but I have nothing really to add.
Thank you, Mr. Cervello. Finance Committee, Mr. Trevino.
Yes, there's a summary in your agenda of the Finance Committee meeting. Unless someone has any questions, I won't elaborate.
Thank you, Mr. Trevino. Yes, Mr.
Could I add one thing? As we welcome Ms. McMullen to the COG, we'd also like to thank Ms. Jennifer Stegelman for her capable service, and really to all the finance staff for getting us through a very important element in what we do with the finance realm.
Oh, I certainly agree, and that was her services were definitely needed. Human Resources Committee, Mr. Magruder. Thank you. And Parks Capital did not meet. Public Safety Committee, Ms. Robb.
The only thing I would like to speak on, take a few minutes, is new Fire Director Sean Kaufman did an outstanding job at our public safety meeting, and he wanted us as our municipality officials to reiterate Code Red, the app that should be on your mobile phones. We ask that you continue to get the word out to put that on your phone. On August the 7th, the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning about 2 p.m. and advised people to take shelter in the basement or inner room or on the lower floors. After the tornado expired, a severe thunderstorm warning was issued. Sean asked us, and put it very nicely, that to ask your neighbor, did they get a warning on their phone? And if they said they did not, that means they do not have the Code Red app on their phones. And just to reiterate, to get that on your phone, because it does help. It saves lives. And on September the 30th, Sean will be giving us some more information on the new additional Code Red app and our Patton Township, at our Patton Township Children's Fair. So Sean, we look forward to the additional information and to continue to inform our residents to get Code Red on their phones. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robb. I have it on my phone, and I got warned. And as somebody who grew up in Kansas, I can tell you getting warned about tornadoes is really important. Facilities report, Ms. Hartle. Thank you. And what's informally called the Lucy Committee, Mr. Haymeister. Okay. Climate Action and Sustainability Committee, Ms. Whitman.
Nothing to add. I want to emphasize that when the website comes out, Sustainable Center County, we hope it will be a one-stop shop for climate action questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Whitman. And Parks and Rec Governments Special Committee, Mr. Frank.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe the agenda covers, we're starting to make progress towards a recommendation to the general forum.
Okay. And I think that is the extent of the reports that we have that were chaired by general forum members. Other business, there are a number of matters of record. Are there any, Mr. Norenberg, that we should pay special attention to?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to draw your attention. It was referenced earlier, the dates for the Finance Committee budget hearings are in your packet, matter of record F. And then just draw your attention to item H. There was a local government roundtable that featured both Mr. Graham as a trustee of the Bollesburg Fire Company and Sean Kaufman as fire director, talking about the challenges facing local communities with their volunteer fire company recruitment and other challenges with supporting volunteer fire companies. And then finally, matter of record K, please join us in congratulating Pam Adams. She's not with us tonight, but next time you see her, please congratulate her on completing the requirements for a certified climate change professional credential. So that's all I have, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Norenberg. And skipping ahead, there is item number 19. Does anyone wish to make a motion?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.